Thank you guys for being here for our college counseling lunch and learn. This is our last lunch and learn of the series, so we see some repeat offenders. So thank you for those of you who have supported our lunch and learn series this season, and for those of you that this is your first time, we're glad you're here to learn a little bit about college counseling and what that looks like at St. Mary's. We have with us our Dean of College Counseling, Hunt Hefner, who has a wide range of experience. He's coming to us immediately from working in independent school admission, but he has worked previously in college admission and college counseling. So he has a lot of different, been in a lot of different areas. So he's got great experience sharing. He and his family also live on campus, and he is the father of one of our 9th graders. So he has that parent hat on too. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and he'll run through to provide that insight into our college counseling program. Then we'll have time for questions. We'll go from there. So,
right, thank you. And apologize for the formality of standing behind the podium, but obviously it's going to be the best way for me to share some of this information with you all. So don't let's be a barrier to asking questions, especially as we get toward the end of the presentation. I also apologize for the mask, but such are the times that we continue to live in, and let's face it, it's enhancing the view on your part for the next 45 minutes or so if you wear a mask. So we'll call it a win across the board. In this case, I get the pleasure of leading our college counseling team that includes 2 other counselors here on campus. I live on campus. I get to be a faculty member. I do duty over on our sophomore and junior dorm on Crookshank. I'm an advisor to 11th graders. And yes, I'm a parent to a 9th grader, so I sort of understand the process and where some of you all are. But I think even more relevant, I'm also the parent of a prospective student who's a 7th grader. So I kind of get where you are in coming through this process. And trying to fill out the information to get a feel for a school and all that it has to offer. So in so many ways, it's very appropriate. This is the last of our lunch and learns because in so many ways it is the bookend part of still my career here with this budget report. It is sort of the bookend on the back end for our seniors, obviously coming through this process before. So I don't, just really quick, any of y'all have older children who've gone through the process, nieces, nephews, family friends, anyone who's been through the college admissions process before? Okay, so you probably have heard a bit about it, though. I think it's one we all can think back to our own process and what we went through. And so sometimes it really does make us feel like this in some way, shape, or form. So these two cartoons that are up here is one introducing a student to a maze and saying, have you started building in college yet? That's what I sometimes feel like, this maze that has to be figured out. And then the cartoon on the right is sort of this gauntlet to be run, this task, all these different tasks that have to be completed. And it certainly can feel like that at times for students and families going through the process. It certainly requires an investment of time and energy, emotional and otherwise, on the part of families to go through the process, search for schools, put themselves out there through the application process itself. So some of this is reality. There is a little bit of a maze to be worked through. But that's our job in college counseling. And I think it's one of the real benefits of small schools in general, and small schools like St. Mary's in particular. We're really able to help families and students through that process. So we're here to support you to help make that maze feel a little more navigable. To hope that what feels like a gauntlet at times, to break it into parts and help you understand that we're just focusing on this one part and this is managing. The whole thing can seem overwhelming. So we're able to focus on one part of the process and starts to feel far, far more manageable by going through the process. And really, one of the main ways that we can support students here at St. Mary's is through the seminar program. If you have spent any time getting to know the school and been on campus, I'm sure you've heard about seminar. It starts in 9th grade, it works its way all the way through senior year, and it really is for us a great way to get in front of these students to be able to talk to them about the college process in a time-appropriate, age-appropriate way. We begin in 9th grade, work our way through senior year, and I'll outline a little bit of what that looks like from year to year as we move forward. You've been doing a bit before, this is a little bit of maybe a familiar set of numbers here on campus, but as soon as you start with this in 9th grade, you're going to have over 25 seminar sessions just focused on college counseling as they move through. And really beyond that, if you throw in some other sessions that are outside members coming in and working with our students. Senior seminar, which I'll touch on a little bit more, which we really are the seminar program for seniors in the fall of their senior year. They're going to have really close to 16 plus hours of time during their school day. It's already carved out through seminar dedicated to working on the college application process. We're basically taking 16 hours for a lot of students, which tends to come at home on the weekends, on off times, built into all these other commitments that are out there for students. We take that and shift at least this big bulk of these hours into their school day where we're there readily available, answer the easy questions for them, give them good guidance, So we get into senior seminar, which we'll touch on a little bit more in depth. We've got about 16 hours of working time for those seniors in the seminar program. And for us as college counselors, in a typical year, we're going to be sending out over 600 applications submitted to 150 plus different institutions that are out there. So, as you can imagine, as a college counselor, there's another little set of comics for you guys. We're looking at a lot of essays. So maybe one thing that parents like to know, yes, we're there to help with this essay process. It doesn't fall on your all shoulders to help your student, your child through this process in terms of essays. I don't know how easily people can read, but yes, it's everything from the one on the right. I want to show my colleges I'm well-rounded, so our poem in Spanish about how chess clubs make me a better quarterback. We're there to talk through topics like, is that a great topic, or is that really 3 essays that you just cram into one? How do we break that out and really stay on point, focus on answering the question? And yes, it does involve catching typos along the way. The one on the left of I read your college application essay. First of all, the word college has 2 L's. So we all make mistakes, we all have typos, and so we're working with students as part of that process on everything from 10,000-foot big type of topics, zeroing down everything from catching typos, capitalizing certain things, to actually about a common essay. So we really do a lot of editing, working with our students. That level of attention clearly is more on the back end senior year for the students coming through. The seminar does allow us to get in front of the students beginning in 9th grade, which is something that we really appreciate. Having that dedicated time, using time that's already built in their schedule is big. It's a case that I've had the pleasure of working in a lot of different environments, and I've worked in places where they have these group meetings with younger students in particular early on. You're using sort of an assembly time or class meeting time, you're vying for that versus other options that are out there for them to learn more information about, which are all well and good. But I think you guys are here today because you understand it's a little bit of a process. We want the students to enjoy their seminary experience, and a big part of that leads to having good college choices down the road. But when you're applying for high school, you know that next step, that next application is not too many years down the road. So we really benefit from having a seminar program where we can work with those instructors, we can build time in, have plenty of time to work with students. So these are standard class period times that meet every day. So when we're able to come in, it's just a normal part of the routine. They know they're going to be there for that hour plus sitting in that class, and allows us to really kind of slow things down, take things at an appropriate pace, engage with them, questions, see what's on their mind, and meet them where they are, which I think is really important. So I combine first year and sophomore year timelines just because they're pretty similar. I mean, they're a little bit off in terms of exactly what we're in those sessions, but basically for our first year students and for our 10th graders, we're in the seminar sessions in late fall, and that's really introductions, so we can be faces, not just names. We can make sure they know where we're located downstairs on Lower Smeedy, so if they want to come see us, they can stop in and feel like we're accessible to them. We want to give them an overall timeline just so they're aware of what does this look like over the course of the next 3-4 years from here. Again, just sort of prepping them. We don't expect them to have to figure it out. We're never going to ask them tonight where you want to go to college, what do you want to major in. We're not going to give them, I don't like asking that of seniors sometimes in terms of what you're going to major in. We're not giving that, but we want them to be aware of the opportunity they have to sort of build a set of experiences and experience time in the same areas. It's going to lead to something they're going to put on paper, more or less, and share with colleges as a part of this application. Down the road, for our sophomores, we introduce them to a system called SCORE. I'm happy to go into more later on. I'm not going to belabor that point. The SCORE is basically a college counseling-specific tool that allows us to share information about specific schools. There's seminary-specific data. There's general data from the colleges that are out there. It's ultimately how we submit supporting documents to colleges through the SCORE system. So it's a good thing for them to be familiar with early on. We invite you all as parents to a bit of information a little bit later on in the process. We don't do that for any quite sophomore year, but we'll get you involved and get you an account so you can access that good information in SCORE as well. In the late winter, so not all that long ago, we were back in those freshman and sophomore seminar classes to talk about course selection. So again, even though in that first year is relatively straightforward in terms of sequentially what a lot of those classes look like, we still come to their seminar classes to see what questions they have. Again, to get them thinking a little bit about broader, what does it look like, not just next year, but the year after that, and wrestling with some of the ideas that I think are good for them to think through. We, of course, are talking about summer opportunities all along the way, not necessarily promoting them to go out and do anything beyond what they already were thinking about doing or what they've done previously, but just recognizing that summer's a really nice time to go supplement what you may not be able to do during the school year, or if you start to find a real strong interest in a particular area, it's a great way to do a little bit deeper dive. And that yes, those things matter in the college application process. They do care what you do in the summer. Some may ask you specifically, what have you done over summer? We always tell them it doesn't mean that every waking hour needs to be filled from the time school ends until the time you come back, but you do have a lot of time to go digging some interest and do some things. Part-time jobs, perfectly fine. Summer camp, perfectly fine. Having an internship, great. There's a lot of different ways that could be filled. We just want them thinking about that sooner rather than later. We also just want to continue to reinforce the idea of their overall experience and make sure they're balanced, think about academics as well as the extracurricular opportunities that are available to them, and making sure that they think about those in tandem and not in isolation. When you think about just an individual class, think about just your afternoons, and you don't think about how they all fit together. That's where sometimes we can get a little overwhelmed, things can get off the rails a little bit from time to time for some students. You just continually reinforcing that notion of balance for them as they move through. And then this is true for the sophomores, again, primarily because the first year students, their course selection, it's relatively straightforward in terms of sequentially what's going to come next. Sophomores start to have a little more choice as they look toward junior year, obviously. So we're going to be back in a section of for us this year. We asked if we could come back in the seminar for an extra meeting with them this year, just to touch base, just as they're sort of on the back end of that course selection process, just to see what other questions are lingering for you guys. What are you thinking about? How are you feeling? So coming back into that, and then we actually also made a choice this year to assign our college counselors a little bit sooner than normal. So those have actually already been announced. So we've gone ahead and told our sophomores who they're going to be working with for the next couple of years, just so if they do have questions as they move through the end of the year, instead of it feeling a little more awkward coming forward and saying, I don't know who to go to, even though we constantly tell them we're a team, you can come see, you can talk to any of us, we're always available to you. We know it's a little bit easier, especially when you're younger, to know exactly who you should go to and ask that question that's on your mind. So we've already done those assignments, but that's something that happens in the spring of the sophomore year for our students.
Huh?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So those counselor assignments, are they done, is there a method to the assignment for a certain student, or is it sort of divide and conquer arbitrary?
It's more arbitrary than anything, to be honest. We can keep students together if we work. I always joke around unless the parents told us, hey, like, we enjoyed this first time around, we don't want to work with you with our second child coming through. Typically, we keep siblings together as they come through, which thankfully very rarely happens where someone comes forward and says, we'd like to make a switch. But in fairness, siblings are different. So if you have a different child, and there might be a different personality fit, we would want to honor that if we could. So we tend to keep siblings together. I have junior advisees, so I actually, being new this year, switched a couple of them from one assignment to me just because I'm going to know them best in theory between those of us in the college counseling office. We do try to keep a little bit of balance for ourselves between the class, so making sure that no one in the counseling group is working with predominantly the top, middle, or bottom of the class, because that can be a slightly different experience, and we want to make sure that we're able to serve all those students equally. And same thing with the boarders. I do duty on that junior-senior dorm. It would have been really easy for me to put down all of the junior boarders and say, I'm going to work with all of them, because I got to know them in different ways over the course of the year. But, it's good for us to all have those boarders. So there's a little bit of method to the madness, but for the most part, it's relatively arbitrary.
And you, one counselor, get that assigned, ask a question.
As a sophomore, and you stick with them typically as you move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good questions. Appreciate it. So fast forward to junior a little bit. When we get in there in the beginning of the year with the juniors, we revisit score because we are realists, as we've already said. I'm a parent. I'm not trying to fool myself, but they all were sitting there taking detailed notes sophomore year when we brought it up. So we do go back and revisit score, how they can use it, remind them of the good information that's in there. We do start talking about SAT and ACT, which maybe this is the moment that things start to feel a little more real for the students in some way, shape, or form. But we do let them know in the beginning of their junior year that they need to start thinking about a plan. They don't have to come up with it in the fall, but they need to start realizing that the first round of testing that we tend to recommend students take, doesn't mean everyone has to follow this recommendation, but is the winter of their junior year. So the deadlines are going to hit in late fall. So we need to start getting that type of information out, making them think about that, talk with parents to come up with a strategy and plan around SAT and ACT planning. We also want to make them aware that the college reps who come to campus and visit from all across the United States. We have international reps who are coming to school. Those visits are available to them. They absolutely should feel comfortable coming to those as juniors and encourage them to do so. So that's sort of the purpose of the fall meeting. We have with them a little bit later on in the fall. We actually have our junior kickoff program, which is a parent-student event. We've broken that over the past few years, in part due to being virtual into a two-part program, which we've just maintained over this past year. For the very least, for one part, we do dig into the SAT, ACT a little bit more, and I hate to put focus on it because obviously we live in a test-optional world, so if anything has become less important. But it is something that I think people need to be aware of how it's used and what those tests look like. So we do dedicate some time to that in the kickoff program. And then we've had more or less a panel of admission professionals from different schools come and share some insights and thoughts with the families that are there. So we typically do that in the late fall. And then right after that, we go back in the seminar to kind of debrief what they heard in those two sessions to see if they have any questions as students. And we also, when all that's going on, we have had an outside group come in typically about half dozen, 8 sessions, scattered over, usually weekly in nature. Sometimes there's some years they've been 2 weeks. We actually have an outside group come in, not to necessarily do test prep. I want to be clear, we're not trying to do formal test prep in that time, but we do want to expose them to what these different tests are like. Again, it's awfully hard for me to come in and say, here, SAT, ACT, you guys need to think about registering for one of those tests in the middle of your year. What exactly is the difference between the two? So sometimes we found it's better and easier to have an outside group come in and give them some exposure, give them some practice questions, be able to walk them through the real differences so they can make an informed decision about maybe what's the best test for them, what test they feel is more connected to in some way, shape, or form. So we're doing that outside of our seminar sessions. That's in addition to what we're doing when we're there with the students. So junior year continued because it is kind of an important time. This is actually a fun time of the year where we're getting into the seminar sessions more regularly. So in addition to taking hopefully that first round of standardized tests in this early spring, late winter time frame, we get to be in with the juniors regularly here for the rest of the year. So we're going to be a regular fixture for them, probably 6 sessions or so between now and the end of the school year. We're doing everything from actually getting their Common App set up. So your juniors would go home with their Common Application set up, passwords ready to go, familiar with it, starting to fill out a little bit of basic information that's not going to change from one year to the next and will get carried over. So we're getting into that level of detail actually with them in junior year. We obviously are sending them out, having them go to teachers that they think are going to advocate best for them in terms of this process, and asking typically 2 teachers to write recommendations for them. So that's something that our juniors will be doing here pretty soon. As a part of the Common App, playing off of that, we'll talk about activities lists. We'll talk about what that resume, so to speak, would look like for them and start building that out as a part of our sessions in the spring with juniors. Then we do an essay writing workshop, which we've also had outside. We've typically had outside people come in. This year we're going to have some folks from the college side come in and work in some groups and have them give their viewpoint on what they think makes for a good essay, what they're looking for in essays. So they're going straight from some of the people who are reading these essays. Very well, university might read their essay in another year, depending on the college they apply to. And then again, I feel like I'm making this more important than it is. They'll take the SAT or SAT again in this late spring, early summer. So we do have some essays that have gone beyond the end of our school year. For some students, that's a great option because it gets them free of all their school obligations and it works really well. Some folks are off camp right away and those just aren't going to work well. So lots of different opportunities, and then again, they have a chance in their senior year to take those tests, typically one more time if they want to. So senior year, we're getting close to the end here, so if you guys have more questions, you'll have a chance to jump in with those, which I appreciate any questions that you all may have. Senior year, as I say, college counseling really is senior seminar. We're in there from literally first class day through early November, 2 sessions a week. So the students have 2 seminar sessions with us every week during their senior fall. It tends to be about 12 meetings. I think this is really truly, over all my years, I've been talking with other people. Certainly other schools have seminar-style programs that have something similar. I think the way we use it and the way we build this dedicated time into the senior schedule to work on their applications, that's the part that I think is different about our program and some of the other ones out there. They also are getting really regular access to all this as counselors. So during the sessions, we'll team teach them from time to time, or we're all in. There's other times where one will take the lead and the other 2 are available during those times. Students can set up individual meetings during that seminar meeting time. So it's really a great way for us all to be present for our students on a regular basis, sort of known times that we're available to them. We can provide obviously very time-sensitive, relevant information to them as we work through that full fall, multi-month kind of set of classes that we have. And the other key thing, again, is dedicated work time. So usually in that given week, we share out some information at the beginning of the week, and the second session that week is dedicated time for them to work on that item. So if we're going through and talking about activities and giving some information, we may do that on Monday, and then when they're back with us on Wednesday, they're actually spending that hour plus time in Common App working on that activity. So taking the information we just talked about, fresh in their minds, putting it into action, and working on it. So I think that dedicated work time, senior seminar was great. This was really good. This was a really helpful time. I enjoyed it. We try to have a little bit of fun in there too if we can. And just overall, we're going to cover every single aspect of the college application process with the students over the course of our time in senior seminar. To make no mistake, kind of starting this time of the year with the juniors and then extending through as much time as we need with the seniors. In that final year, those individual meetings, none of this replaces individual meetings. I just want to make that very clear. The seminar is a great way to get bulk information out in small groups. Typically, our seminar classes are anywhere from 12, 13 students to around 20 or so. It's a small group, a little easier to ask questions, a little easier to engage. None of that replaces individual meetings with students. So we have ongoing individual meetings with students from middle of junior year all the way through whenever they need us. And we're going to have students that just had a student pop by the other day, asking about something falling with the school where they were deferred, have students coming in and asking about that whole process of making their decision, and they're kind of torn, but they're trying to focus on the right things. Whatever it may be for them, they need from us, we're there for them all the way through the end of the school year, and maybe even beyond. let's be honest, we're in a world where waitlists, and if anyone's not familiar, that's where a school says, more time to come up with a final decision, because waitlists can linger into the summer months after the school year's ended. We're here for them too. If they need us, we need to send out final grades. If they need bounce ideas off us, we're going to stay with them through that whole process and work with them. Moving forward, obviously, I said I put up the cartoons earlier, comics, joke around about essays a little bit. That's not something that we expect to do in a group setting. There's going to be individual meetings where we come in and talk about essay topics and work through that process with them and give them support there. Talking about their individual lists is not going to be something that we expect them to own publicly in any way, shape, or form. Some of these schools have supplements that get kind of detailed, so some of our individual meeting times are going to be dedicated to that as well. And as I've already hit on, sort of all the way through the spring season, working through those different items that you see there. And really most importantly, celebrating them. I mean, that's the fun part of the job. You get to the back end, where they get these final decisions, they make choices where they go, they're excited. We have a board downstairs on Lower Smedes right now, where the students are able, as they start to make their final decisions, write their name and where they're going, and put that on the board. So collectively as a group and as faculty members to be able to celebrate with them and see where those final decisions are being made is great. So I don't know, I put this next slide in a little bit of my own peril, so I hope I can see a couple like upturned corners with mouths bordering on smiles. But when we say we cover all aspects of the process, as parents, I want you to know we really do mean we cover all aspects of the process, and that includes talking to students about the costs associated with attending school. We try to reinforce with them that's a family decision, something you need to be talking with your parents about. The safety school sometimes is not just a school you can get into, but a school you can afford. So these two comics that are up here, the one on the left, says she's not crying because you're going to college, she just saw the bill. So it's expensive, we get it. There's a lot of good choices out there that we know come with a certain cost. And so that's a fact that you need to consider for parents, and we promote that with the students to understand that. And the one on the right, some of you may think this is a great idea, and some may cry about it. It'll cost you $100,000 to send me to college, but I'll stay home for $50,000. So you make a choice on which one. That sounds better to you on the long run. Most of our students are figuring out a way to get to great colleges and have a good experience as the next step. This is early on in the process. We're sitting here on March 2nd. These students technically have almost 2 months left to both get some final decisions and make final decisions on whether they matriculate. So these are early returns from students who got through early programs, they've seen enough of their decisions come back that they know where they want to go. But these are actual schools that our current class of seniors have committed to going to and signed on the dotted line in terms of enrollment. So it'll continue to grow. We continue to expect to have many students joining them. So some of these schools that are already listed up here, adding some other really interesting schools to the list as they move forward. And again, we really love the celebrating part in terms of working through them on that choice and that hard work payoff, not just through the application process, but the entire time through high school, paying off with something really great opportunities. The kids go to a range of schools. We send them West Coast, we send them Northeast, Midwest. You can imagine South, and most of us, if we think that's our own experiences, we tend to be a little provincial. We tend to like to live a little bit close to home. So we are going to have a sort of between the DC area down to the South is always going to be a popular landing spot for a lot of our students. But very proud of the students who want to get outside of the norm, think about some different options, focused on sometimes very specific programs like nursing or engineering, and that's the big draw to them to a particular final choice. Some want small schools, some want large schools. And so it's really fun to see where they ultimately land. And I think anyone who's worked in this business for a while, there's surprises along the way. I mean, the students will tell you they get surprised sometimes by where they end up. It's not what they thought they would in the very beginning.
So question for you.
Yeah.
In terms of like, once they start getting a sense of what they may want to do, like, do you help figure out, okay, these colleges specialize in this, or they're
Absolutely.
top ranked?
Yeah, that's a huge part. I mean, as we go through this whole process, we're into question and answer mode now, so you guys feel free to kind of fire away with whatever's on your mind, or whatever I did cover well enough that we need to backfill a little bit. That's a huge part of it. I mean, obviously there's 3,500, maybe pushing 4,000 college options that are out there. At some point in time, you have to start having some parameters in there. I mean, a student, as a college counselor, you really love a student, has a pretty open mind to the range of opportunities that are available to them. It's also at the same time, it's a nightmare. If you have someone sitting in your office, you're like, oh, I'll go anywhere. In the United States, big, small, that's great. It would be great to have, a lot of programs available to me. And so sometimes I feel like plug some either into my head or into the computer, put some parameters in and start narrowing that down. So the student has a really good idea of what they may want to study, and we take that with a huge grain of salt. Because I think with anything, how do you know when you don't even understand what some of the majors really are that are out there? But if the student comes and has a pretty clear interest in a particular area, that's what wants me to end the slide.
I think that's the other component to it too, right, is like how much help, obviously the parent, you would go to USA Today and say who's good in pharmacology, but like also trying to understand, like, I don't know what majors there are today, right?
Sure.
It's been a long time since I've been in college and there's a ton more things out there.
Right.
So like understanding how you help say, okay, this is what you're interested in, this is what your aptitude is for, like helping them decide or trying to guide them to what might be some options. Is that something that?
Yeah, that's absolutely a big part of what we do starting right now in junior year. So those are the types of questions that will start junior year and build out the list, knowing that it can change. And we're very open with that. We tell students all the time, conversations you have junior year, the list that we start to build out, it can change. There's nothing saying that just because we invest the time in having these conversations and you spend your time as family going out and visiting some of the schools that you have to end up applying some of those places. If you have a moment over the summer and you realize there's a different kind of calling or direction that you get pulled in, that's okay. We can pivot. We can go into a different mode. Because you can imagine with a lot of these schools, more times than not, you're going to find a situation where some of the schools out just offer that other program that you think you're interested in. So you're not going to move completely away from some of the places that you're thinking about. But yeah, there are some specialized programs out there that it's good to know sort of who's really actually good in that particular area. Give a little bit of a nudge to go check out schools that might be in a different part of the country, but that's going to be where you find some of those programs. The other thing that we try to give guidance on, which is a little more the senior year part of the process to a certain extent, is some schools, certain majors have a slightly different lens or set of criteria that they're looking for. So that's why we're in a course selection came up multiple times, but that's the reason why it does, is that in some cases I've had to have these conversations with students. If you're thinking about going into an engineering program, then they're going to zero in on certain math and science classes, and you just need to know that. It doesn't mean that you have to take that class just for that reason, but it's my job to make sure you understand that's going to be part of the process next year, and it supports you whatever decision you make. And there's going to be some times where that program, an engineering program or nursing program or international business is going to be a little harder to get into. So we need to understand that, make sure that sort of first major, second major, if the schools have that type of option on the table. Yes, we're talking through all those different types of issues with the students. And again, I wish we had a crystal ball, much different like the Harry Potter magic sorting hat would be really easy if you just throw that on them and you know exactly where you should apply and how this is all going to work out. It's tough. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. Some of the schools in the Southeast in particular become more competitive. We do get surprised from time to time. We do have some moments where the tissue boxes got to come out on occasion because it just happened to be that year that things got a little more competitive and someone's getting a decision that none of us really were certainly not hoping for and weren't even necessarily anticipating the most likely decision that you could get. So it happens. So that's why we build a broad list. Hopefully, again, having those safety or more likely college choices on there being real choices. That's the thing as a college counselor that kills you on the back end where you get to that point, and if someone reach, which we support them in doing, a couple of those schools that are left are like, okay. It's hard. We needed this to be good options. We needed this to be options that you really were somewhat excited about going to or felt better about. So it can be hard. You go through the process for sure, but yeah, we try to build out all those different scenarios.
Typically, when do students visit schools? Is it before their senior year, before their junior year?
Yep.
And do they typically visit all the schools they apply to, or
Right.
80%, 70%? And how many schools does the typical St. Mary's girl apply to?
So we tend to encourage, so obviously the most of the visiting is happening in the junior year and the summer before senior year. It can happen before then. So there's no right or, and I would tell the students that over and over and over again, there's no right or wrong. There's a lot of different ways you can navigate this whole process. And so the key thing is doing it the right way for you. I mean, I'm talking ninth graders. I have ninth graders who come into my office and want to talk about sort of the arc of 4 years for them here on campus. So that's someone who we're probably going to talk about visiting some campuses more between sophomore and junior year. That doesn't mean that going earlier leads to any better results. It also doesn't mean that waiting a little bit longer is the wrong thing to do if that's right for a family. So when we start talking about more in junior year, is thinking about visits, when you're going to get out, using the breaks we have. We have some really nice long breaks in some cases, so how do you utilize those? I know not necessarily the most fun. As parents may be okay with that. I know not necessarily the best way to think about using vacation days as a parent, or for the students to think about using their vacation days from school. But it's just part of it. It's going to be the best time where you get out and you can see a college campus in action with the students there, get a real feel for the place. Summer's fine, but you've got to run that risk of the students aren't there, you're going to get a slightly different feel for campus. So any of you guys who've been up on State's campus in the middle of the school year, very different in the summertime when they're gone. I grew up in Chapel Hill, so we always talk about when the students were there and when they're not there. So not bad necessarily, but a different feel you're going to get if you go in the summertime. But sometimes that's what works best for students. So we encourage a handful, 6, 7, 8 visits hopefully over the course of junior year to start getting a sense for places. So in some ways that answers your question of, you're not going to go visit everywhere. It's an unrealistic ask in some ways at the end of the day. A lot of families are playing the game of if we're admitted, we'll try to go back. Back to your question, in some ways that's where we help navigate the whole, like, okay, with that school, they take interest into account to a certain extent. So when the rep's here, you really need to make sure you stop by and go to that visit, or you need to drop them an email, or you need to sign up for an online event or something. So we try to do our best to navigate that. If you can't get out to the campus, but we know they may take interest into account, how do we tackle that in a different way for you moving forward? Ultimately, the average has been like about 8 nice schools in terms of applications over the past few years. I had a student I worked with this year that was one and done. Applied in one school, she knew where she wanted to go, was able to get in through sort of a rolling process early. Very, very happy, has remained very happy, which is always the key in that scenario. So one and done. Other students who, they're into double digits, we'll just leave it at that. And there's good reason why, and I have no problem with that. The funny thing is that as a college counselor, it's not really that much more work for us if a student applies to 6 schools or 10 schools or 12 schools. It's about the same amount of work. And you go click to send things out. The recommendation letters are written. They get sent to the schools. The transcripts are uploaded. There's really not much extra work on our part. There can be with essays. Don't get me wrong. We're going to be there again for all the supplemental essays, but it's really investment of time. Students' investment is far greater to apply to 3 or 4 more schools by writing the essays than it is for me to edit them, or work with them on editing them and coming through. So we try to encourage them. We want to we want them to have that balance. We want them to be thoughtful about the schools they're applying to, but they get in the double digits. So usually a good reason why, and we're going to support them and even apply those additional schools for sure.
How common is the Common App?
It is very
Is it like 90% plus coverage? Or?
Probably. Yeah, I think it's probably a pretty good guess at the end of the day. I'm trying to think the primary schools that will have students applying to who don't use the Common App. Georgetown would be one. Georgetown is stuck to their own app. And Les Charlie Deacon up there, he's been up there forever and a day. This is the system he likes, and he's stuck with it. Whether they should have changed or not, I don't know. But Georgetown Middle School is going to use their own application. The UC system. So all the California schools have their own Common App. So the nice thing is you don't apply to 3 UC schools. It's all the same application. You just send it out to the different campuses. So those would be 2 of the big ones that I can think of off the top of my head that our students would apply to that are not Common App. I'm 100% sure I'm forgetting 1 or 2 that are in there, but the vast majority are Common App schools. And then the wild card becomes how many of them just take the standard Common App information in terms of the essay without much supplemental work, and then how many schools are asking for some additional hoops to be jumped through in terms of the questions that they ask.
Just a question about international colleges and what proportion of students might apply outside of the US.
Sure.
And how do you support students that want to go outside of the US?
Right, both parts of that are really good questions. So we do have students who are looking outside the US every single year. I always think the big question is from junior year, the idea of looking abroad, and the reality of senior year of actually going, and maybe even not even to that point of applying, and then, oh my gosh, am I really going to go? Am I really going to go overseas? We had a student this year who applied to and was admitted relatively early on to the University of St. Andrews. She just happened to have the number of AP scores from junior year and sophomore year that she needed to kind of get through that initial clearing for them, so they were able to give her a decision relatively early on. We had a student who was admitted to the University of Aberystwyth in Wales. We have a young woman who's looking at 3 or 4 schools in the greater London area, so King's College probably being the most prominent name in the group, and a couple of others within that system that just felt like the right fit, right match for her. We actually had a great session earlier this year where a former student who took a gap year from St. Mary's took that time to really think about what she wanted and needed. Originally thought UK was maybe where she wanted to go, but then started realizing Europe more broadly was actually what she was interested in. She wrote to Ms. Lee, who's one of college counselors, and said, I'd really love to do a session on European schools for students. And we have a little bit of like, are people going to show up? I mean, she's going to school in Amsterdam. I don't know if someone really was that interested in Amsterdam specifically. We probably had 18 kids who were down there at all different grades, in part because they were supporting the program, in part because some of them knew a sibling who had come through as well. But I think, again, we actually have genuine interest in schools overseas every year, and I think that was really good to hear from a former St. Mary's student who made that leap and was doing really, really well overseas. We've had a handful of schools that again, I'll probably forget a couple of them. University of Durham visited earlier this year, Toronto. We had a students look at McGill, we've had students look, so, between Canada, UK being popular, I had a student who looked at New Zealand earlier this year, and I'm working with another student who's kind of interested in New Zealand as well as options. So again, I love the fact that we're willing to think big and look at different places. The reality of how you make the leap to go overseas, I think that number starts to get smaller and smaller. How we support them, I think, goes back again a little to your question. Sometimes thinking about helping them understand what the differences in the educational system are like, the differences in the campus. So we'd like to try to do some work on the front end for them to understand what they're moving into, and maybe being more so than support actually after they graduate and they're gone. And hopefully we've done a little bit of work for them to find places where they're going to be well supported, have a good history with international students, and can have a positive experience with them. So yeah.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate any significant reversals to things like test optional moving forward, and do you help students kind of work through the process of looking at colleges with that in mind?
No and yes. Next question. No, we don't expect any major changes, to be honest. I think, again, we've seen a few schools that have gone ahead and made their moves in terms of which side of this pilot period of test optional they're falling out on. Not surprisingly, you're seeing more small private liberal arts style schools sticking with test optional programs. You see some of the bigger public schools gravitating back to some test optional programs. So there's going to be some interest. It'll be an interesting spring. I think that the tough part from the public standpoint is this may either be cringeworthy or maybe a lot of the decisions for the public universities are not decisions that the university are making. They're being made through general assemblies and votes that are happening by folks who are hopefully being very well informed of the good and bad of what's going on. But anytime that's going to happen, we're not sure if it's very honest what can happen. So Tennessee went back being requiring tests, University of Tennessee system, University of Georgia system, University of Florida system never left. They all require tests, so that's again, please, the only reason why we had SAT and ACT up there multiple times on this timeline was not that we think it's a great measure or where you need to find your value in a score that you have on a test, but Georgia, Tennessee, we don't know what's going to happen in a couple of the other schools in the Southeast. The long story short, there's schools that we know our students are going to be applying to that require tests. So therefore, our job is to help make sure they're prepared and aware of that, and if they have that test, they can present to those schools when they need to apply. So don't expect any major changes from that standpoint. And yes, a big part of what we do is working through, okay, you have a test score, you don't have to send it to the school, should you send it to the school? That's become a big part of our work in the fall with the seniors of working through individually schools and trying to make our best guesswork on whether you should submit a score or not submit a score.
Do you have any resources you would suggest, like us as parents, to kind of get ahead of the curve?
Yeah.
Not for applications, but just to understand the process. I'm just thinking, I have a senior boy right now, and then my girls are younger, but he was a COVID high schooler more so than the other one. So we're just trying to kind of work through that process and understand things a little bit better in terms of what to look for, what they need.
That's a really interesting question. I think my best recommendation that I could offer, thinking more for you all being parents of middle school students and not so much the 8th grade element, or sorry, the senior, kind of more in the process part. It could be interesting to pick a couple schools that you may have familiarity with, or just on your mind, like, hey, it's not necessarily where I think you should ultimately go to school, but the schools that I respect. A lot of them have either social media feeds, whatever you might be on Instagram or on Facebook, go to their feed, follow it. Some of them have blogs as well on their site where they're releasing certain information. That could be just a really interesting way to see what they're pushing out to seniors, which in essence is going to give you an idea of like another 3-4 years. These are the types of things that the school is saying my older child, or my child when they are older, should be thinking about. That could be an interesting way to see what kind of information they push out. There used to be a really great blog through the New York Times. You got this continued eon ago that has really good information on it, which is in there. So there's some podcasts that are out there. Person who is the dean of admission at Penn for a really long time, he was very smart, got on that bandwagon early on. So Eric Furta does, I believe it's called, but Eric Furta does podcasts. There might be some podcasts out there that are interesting to follow early on as well. Yeah, it's a really good question, but it's a tough one too, because it is sort of there's not really a place, I guess, in some ways that you can get this sort of centralized information about all things college counseling. But sometimes the schools have some really Georgia Tech sort of gets out a really interesting post that they have on their social media accounts. So that would maybe be one recommendation to think about a couple schools maybe following that and see what they push out. be sensitive to time, but I think we've got time for a few more.
Yeah, you got time for another question?
More questions or not, I'm sensitive to your time.
Awesome.
Just a quick one, so going back to you talking 3,000, 4,000 schools and narrowing that down. I would imagine, although I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is there almost like a little 10 questionnaire, like what you can say, you know, you talk about big school versus a small school in the region, that can help a student who's sort of trying to define what she wants. Here, you know, here's a list of target schools. Is there maybe a survey or a poll?
Sure, so, yes, so that is part of what we do junior year. So, one of our sessions earlier this year with the juniors, we call it Utopia, where we actually, again, back to the line, I know it sounds really, really corny, but it's just a way over the course of an hour plus long class to have a little bit of fun. So we'll share information with them, and we actually give them big sheets of paper. We have them write down the qualities that are important. And again, stripping away your school name. This is literally creating your utopic school. It may exist, it may not exist. That's the fun part we have to figure out. But listing the qualities that are important to your school, then the sort of silly part is you have to actually draw it. So we actually draw the campus in your mind what it kind of look like. And some of the drawings are really, really good. And some of them are, you know, they stopped at art 2 and art 4 and then moved on. And that was okay. And then we do have questionnaires that we give both the students and then we give parents as well. So just so you all are well aware, parents' voices are important for this for us. We send out a parent questionnaire, which we've sent out. And actually not, you know, the most, I don't say straightforward, but it can, you know, you can take a little time with it if you want to. These aren't simple like yes, no kind of questions. We want sort of a narrative from parents if they want to share. Putting all these pieces together can sometimes give us a good idea of what you're looking for. And then we're following up, obviously, as individual needs that we're having right now. Questions we're going out and you took the sheets in some cases say, tell me a little bit more about what you mean this, or what are you willing to bend on in turn? Because we're starting to, so as counselors who've done this for a long time, you know, you could write down a list of qualities on a sheet of paper right now from schools. And back to your point, if you've given me enough parameters to narrow, in my head, I'm going to be able to start thinking of schools. And I'm not going to nail it. I'm still going to do my due diligence and do research and see what I'm missing based on what I know. But I'd be able to crank out a list of schools on the spot if I had to.
Yeah, which we love noise as well.
Right. So I think coming back and understanding, as you're doing that list in your head, to understand where some of the limitations may be, like, that's going to be hard. Like I had to have that conversation with a student recently of, it's going to be hard to find schools that check off some of your biggest top items in the Southeast. So you have to figure out warm weather versus a couple of qualities that you're really interested in, which is more New England, Midwest. And she went on a trip with her parents, and I think had that reality of like, I got to give them the warm weather. I'm just going to have to get a warmer coat because it's that's really important. And that's why we go on the visits. That's why we go do those trips, and why we encourage you guys to get out there. It's a big investment of time, money, and energy. We understand, but it's really helpful in understanding what resonates with you as a family or as a student going through this process, which then makes the following investment, you know, far more better in so many ways in terms of finding a good fit for the students and moving forward. So yeah, I had that moment. Mom wrote me a note back with some of the schools that I offered up based on the trip that I thought she's like, these don't feel very much like her. And I said, well, these were the criteria that we talked about in our meeting. So I'm all ears. I want to talk. I want to understand. So the pushback is welcome. We kind of got into it, and we had a better understanding after the visit of really, okay, yeah, she does have to give on this. This is going to maybe be one of the place we need to look. So what are the schools there?
You just got the junior year exercise.
Yes, we do that during junior year. Then we revisit senior year as well again. People change, people go visit, they learn more. So we revisit all that senior year, make sure everyone still feels good about geography, program, size of school, location of school in terms of urban versus rural, suburban, whatever that may be. We constantly are rethinking that, making sure that it's still, that the key fundamental parts of that are still the same.
What about connection to, if you've had a St. Mary alum go to the school that your daughter is thinking about, like, do you have to bring alumni back to say, hey, I go to Tennessee, I go to Ole Miss, or do you connect the girls somehow through the St. Mary's?
We do. To be honest, it's one of those situations where we probably could do an even better job of it. I think when students ask when it comes up, if we need to be helpful, we definitely connect them. I think there's a lot of sort of self-seeking out those people because they know people graduated a couple years ago, so they're reaching out to them on social media, they have phone numbers, so they're kind of doing that organically on their own. Whereas in the good old days, they had to come in and be like, yeah, the number someone.
Right.
And we actually have provided, they've got more contacts than we do. So I think they're doing a lot of that on their own.
Yeah.
But if you ever have a student who is looking at a school where they're not sure, you know, someone is there where they don't have the contact point, yeah, absolutely we can connect them with the students. And we do a little bit of, we'll do that internally. So one of the final sessions we do with the juniors is a senior panel. So I know it's not students here in college, but the kids who just come through the search process and thinking about the things that are important to them. That's something we do junior year. And then we have brought alums back to do sessions this Sasser, our assistant head of school, arranged a great panel, and there were about a half dozen students back in
Yes.
chapel earlier this year. The kickoff event for parents, we had a couple of local students come back, along with someone who happens to be a parent and a provost at one of the large colleges in the area come as part of our parent kickoff event for the whole school year, not just our college counseling event. So there's a few ways we brought those voices in, but always think we can do a little bit better.
Great, well, thank
Yeah,
you.